Alan Carter stared at the rejection letter on his tablet and sighed. It was the 5th one this month. He tossed the device onto his cluttered desk, where it landed among scattered notes and half-empty coffee cups. The small basement lab felt even smaller today, with its humming machines and blinking lights that represented 15 years of work no one believed in. Another rejection. Zoe Miller asked as she entered the lab, carrying 2 fresh coffees. She handed one to Alan and leaned against the workbench. The Journal of Quantum Physics says my theories lack sufficient experimental foundation and contradict established principles of physics, Alan said, taking the coffee gratefully. Same story, different words. Zoe shook her head. They're wrong, and someday they'll know it. Alan appreciated her loyalty. At 32, Zoe was 20 years younger than him, but she was the only person at the Interstellar Research Institute who took his work seriously. Her brilliant mind saw possibilities where others saw only fantasy. Dr. Carter, still hiding in your cave? The voice echoed down the stairs before Dr. Olivia Grant appeared in the doorway. As head of the department, she controlled funding and lab assignments. Alan's basement location showed exactly what she thought of his research. Working. Dr. Grant, some of us prefer results to publicity, Alan replied calmly. Olivia's perfectly styled hair and expensive suit contrasted sharply with Alan's rumpled appearance. Results. Is that what you call these 15 years of chasing impossible dreams? She picked up one of his diagrams showing quantum entanglement patterns. Faster-than-light communication breaks every law of physics we know. The laws we know today, not the laws that exist, Alan said. Olivia laughed. The Institute Board meets next week to review funding allocations. I'd prepare a backup career plan if I were you. She dropped the diagram and turned to leave. Oh, and I'm using your last presentation in my lecture series as an example of scientific dead ends to avoid. After she left, Alan stood silently for a moment. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, matching the anger buzzing in his mind. She's afraid, Zoe said quietly. People who are certain they're right don't work so hard to shut others down. Alan nodded and moved to the center of the lab, where his main experiments sat. The quantum entanglement chamber was small, about the size of a microwave, but within it, he was attempting something revolutionary. If 2 particles could maintain instantaneous connections across any distance, as quantum theory suggested, then information could potentially travel faster than light. The math works, Zoe. The theory is sound. We just need to stabilize the quantum field long enough to encode data. He adjusted some settings and watched as paired particles spun in perfect synchronization. Dr. Grant has the board wrapped around her finger, Zoe warned. If they cut our funding, then I'll continue in my garage, Alan said firmly. I didn't spend 15 years on this to quit because some bureaucrats can't see beyond their textbooks. The lab computer suddenly beeped with an urgent news alert. Both scientists turned to the screen. Emergency bulletin. The U.S. horizon has gone silent. Earth's first interstellar colony ship, carrying 10,000 settlers to Proxima Centauri, has ceased all communications. United Earth Space Agency officials report the last transmission showed no signs of distress. Standard communication protocols will require 4.3 years for signals to reach the vessel's last known location. Alan and Zoe looked at each other, the same thought forming between them. If our system worked, Zoe began. We could talk to them right now, Alan finished. Not in 4 years. Now. He turned back to his equipment with renewed determination. The laughter of his colleagues echoed in his mind, but for the first time in years, it didn't matter. 10,000 lives hung in the balance, and his impossible theory might be their only hope. Let's get to work, he said, reaching for his tools. We have a ship to find. The emergency meeting room at the United Earth Space Agency headquarters was packed. Scientists, government officials, and military leaders filled every seat. Large screens showed the last known position of the U.S. horizon, now represented by a blinking red dot near Proxima Centauri. The tension in the air was thick enough to touch. Alan and Zoe stood at the back of the room. They hadn't been invited, but Zoe had used her security clearance to get them inside. Alan clutched a folder containing his research notes and recent test results. "We need solutions, people, not theories," said General Richard Powell, the head of UESA. His gray hair was cut military short, and deep lines marked his face. 10,000 colonists are out there, possibly in danger, and we have no way to know what happened until a signal reaches us in 4 years. Dr. Olivia Grant stood up from her front row seat. "General, my team is proposing we send an automated drone ship with enhanced communication equipment. It could reach the horizon's last known position in 3 years. 3 years is still too long," the general replied. Alan took a deep breath and stepped forward. There might be another way. All heads turned toward him. He saw recognition in some faces, followed by eye-rolling and whispers. "Dr. Carter," Olivia said with a tight smile. "This is a closed meeting for invited experts only." Alan ignored her and addressed the general directly. "Sir, I've developed a quantum communication system that could establish instant contact with the horizon, regardless of distance." The room was silent for a moment before someone in the middle row snorted. That broke the dam, and suddenly half the room was laughing. Alan's face grew hot, but he stood his ground. "Instant communication?" General Powell asked, looking more curious than dismissive. "Faster than light?" "Yes, sir. Using quantum entanglement." "Oh, please," Olivia interrupted. "General, Dr. Carter has been pushing this impossible theory for years. It violates fundamental laws of physics. We can't send information faster than light. Period. My experiments show otherwise." Alan insisted. A scientist Alan recognized from MIT stood up. "I've reviewed Dr. Carter's work. It's fantasy, not science." More laughter filled the room. Alan saw pity in some faces, contempt in others. "Dr. Carter," General Powell said, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we need proven technologies now, not experimental theories." "But, sir, this meeting is for serious proposals only," Olivia cut in. "We don't have time for science fiction fantasies." The laughter grew louder. Alan stood frozen as his life's work was reduced to a joke. Beside him, Zoe touched his arm gently. "Let's go," she whispered. They left the room with the sound of laughter following them down the hall. Alan walked silently, his shoulders slumped but his mind racing. "They didn't even look at our test results," Zoe said when they reached the building's lobby. "Because they've already decided what's possible and what isn't," Alan replied. He stopped walking and turned to her. "But what if we don't need their permission?" "What do you mean?" "The Horizon has quantum-paired particles on board as part of their experimental physics lab. It was in their mission briefing." Zoe's eyes widened. "You want to try to contact the ship ourselves? Without authorization? 10,000 lives, so that's what's at stake." His voice was steady now, his earlier embarrassment replaced by determination. "We have the equipment. We have the theory. We just need to refine the signal targeting to locate their specific quantum signature. If we fail, our careers are over," Zoe pointed out. "And if we succeed?" Zoe thought for a moment, then nodded. "My apartment is closer to the lab. We'll stop for supplies, then work through the night." As they exited the building, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the same colors that had washed over the faces of those who had laughed at him minutes ago. "They won't be laughing when we make contact," Alan said quietly, more to himself than to Zoe. They walked quickly toward the transit station, already planning their next steps. Behind them, the UESA building gleamed in the sunset, while somewhere in the darkness of space, 10,000 lives hung in the balance. For 3 days, Alan and Zoe barely left the basement lab. They took turns napping on the small couch in the corner while the other worked. Empty coffee cups and food containers piled up around them. The whiteboard was covered with equations and diagrams that Alan revised constantly. "The problem is signal stability," Alan said, rubbing his tired eyes. We can create the quantum link, but it breaks down after just milliseconds. Zoe studied the latest test results on her tablet. What if we create a feedback loop? Use the initial connection to strengthen the secondary connection. Alan considered this, then snapped his fingers. Like a self-reinforcing wave. Zoe, that's brilliant. He rushed to the quantum entanglement chamber and began making adjustments. His hands moved quickly over the controls, entering new parameters based on Zoe's idea. "Pass me the phase modulator," he said, pointing to a small device on the workbench. As Zoe handed it to him, the lab door opened. Dr. Olivia Grant stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "I thought I might find you both here," she said. The janitor reported unusual power usage in this section. Alan didn't look up from his work. "We're busy, Dr. Grant." "Busy wasting Institute resources after your theory was rejected by every expert at UESA." Olivia walked closer, examining their setup with obvious disapproval. "The board voted yesterday. Your funding is cut, effective next week. I came to tell you personally." Now Alan did look up. "1 week is all we need." Olivia laughed. "To do what?" "Break the laws of physics." "To save 10,000 lives," Zoe said firmly. "This is delusion, not science," Olivia replied. "I expected better from you, Zoe. You had such promise." She turned back to Alan. "Clean up this lab by Monday. Anything left will be discarded." After she left, Alan and Zoe looked at each other. "We have 3 days," Alan said. They worked without stopping, testing and refining their system. On the second day, they achieved a stable quantum link that lasted 5 seconds, enough time to transmit a simple data packet to a receiver across the room. "It works," Zoe exclaimed, staring at the confirmation reading. "Alan, it actually works." Alan's exhausted face broke into a wide smile. "Now we just need to scale it up and target the Horizon's quantum lab." For the next 24 hours, they pushed their equipment to its limits. The power demands were enormous, causing lights to flicker throughout the building. Twice, security guards came to check on them, but left when Zoe explained they were running final experiments before their funding ended. At 3:47 a.m. on Sunday, Alan made the final adjustments to their targeting system. The quantum entanglement chamber hummed louder than ever, its core glowing with blue-white energy. "Ready?" he asked Zoe, who sat at the communication console. She nodded, fingers poised over the keyboard. Alan took a deep breath and pressed the activation button. The room filled with a high-pitched whine as power surged through their equipment. Warning lights flashed on several monitors, but Alan ignored them. "Quantum field stabilizing," he reported, watching the readouts. "Targeting Horizon's lab coordinates now." The noise grew louder. A small transformer on the wall began to smoke. "We're overloading the system," Zoe shouted. "Just a few more seconds," Alan insisted, his eyes fixed on the stability meter. "Almost there." Suddenly, all the lights in the lab went out. The equipment fell silent. Only the emergency lights remained, casting everything in a dim red glow. "No." Alan slammed his fist on the console. "We were so close." Zoe checked her tablet, which still had battery power. "The signal." "Alan, look at this." He moved to her side, squinting at the screen in the dim light. "Connection established," he read aloud. "Duration, 8.3 seconds. Data packets sent, 42. Data packets received." They both stared at the final number. 7, Zoe whispered. "We received 7 data packets from somewhere." Alan's hands trembled as he reached for the tablet. From somewhere, or from someone. Alan and Zoe worked frantically to decode the 7 data packets they had received. The lab remained dark except for the glow of their tablets and emergency lights. They had triggered a power outage across the entire east wing of the Institute, but that was the least of their concerns now. "It's encrypted," Zoe said, frowning at the screen. "Standard UESA protocol." Alan nodded. "That confirms it came from the Horizon." "Can you break it?" "I can try." Zoe's fingers flew across her tablet. It would be easier if we had access to the main computers upstairs. They both knew that was impossible. By now, security would be looking for the cause of the power outage, and Dr. Grant would immediately suspect them. "We need more time," Alan muttered, pacing the small lab. "And more power for a second attempt." A loud knock on the door made them both jump. Alan quickly covered their equipment with a tarp before opening the door. A security guard stood outside, flashlight in hand. "Dr. Carter, we've had a major power failure. Everyone needs to evacuate the building until we can check the electrical systems." "Of course," Alan said calmly. "We'll pack up our essential items and leave right away." The guard nodded and moved on to the next lab. Alan closed the door and turned to Zoe. "We need to take everything," he whispered. "We won't be allowed back in." They quickly gathered their key components, notebooks, and tablets, stuffing everything into backpacks and boxes. As they worked, Zoe's tablet pinged. "I've broken part of the encryption," she said excitedly. "It's a message fragment, Alan. Listen to this. To Earth Control, this is U.S. Horizon. We are. That's all I can decode so far." Alan's heart raced. "They're alive, Zoe, and they're trying to communicate." They hurried to finish packing, then slipped out of the building among other evacuating scientists. No one paid them much attention in the confusion. Outside, emergency vehicles had arrived, their lights flashing in the early morning darkness. "Where do we go now?" Zoe asked, her breath visible in the cold air. Alan thought for a moment. "My garage. It's not ideal, but it's private." They loaded everything into Zoe's car and drove to Alan's small house in the suburbs. His garage was cluttered with tools and old equipment, but they quickly cleared a space and set up their makeshift lab. "The power supply here isn't strong enough," Alan said, examining the electrical panel. "We need at least 3 times the capacity for another attempt." Zoe connected her tablet to their equipment. "I'm still working on the rest of the message. Maybe there's something in it that can help us." As the sun rose, they continued working. Alan modified their system to use less power while Zoe decoded more of the message. By noon, she had the complete text. "Alan, listen to this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "To Earth Control, this is U.S. Horizon. We are experiencing complete communication system failure after passing through an unknown energy field. Main systems intact. Crew safe. No conventional communication possible. Detected quantum signal attempt. Responding on same frequency. Please confirm receipt." They stared at each other in amazement. "They detected our signal," Alan whispered. "And they're responding on the same frequency. We need to establish a stable connection," Zoe said. "But how? We don't have the power or equipment here." Alan sat down, thinking hard. Then his eyes lit up. "We don't need to create a new connection. The quantum particles are already entangled. We just need to boost our receiver sensitivity to pick up their signals." He grabbed a notepad and began sketching a new design. "We can build a quantum amplifier using parts from my old radio equipment. It won't let us send strong signals back, but we might be able to receive more of their transmissions. And if we can receive, we can at least learn what's happening with the ship," Zoe added, already sorting through the boxes of electronics. As they worked, Alan's phone rang. It was Dr. Grant. He hesitated, then answered on speaker. "Dr. Carter," she said, her voice icy. "Security reports that you and Dr. Miller removed equipment from the lab during the evacuation. Return it immediately, or I'll have you both arrested for theft." Alan looked at Zoe, then at their half-assembled quantum receiver. "I'm sorry, Dr. Grant," he said firmly, "but 10,000 lives are more important than my career." He hung up before she could respond. They had made their choice. There was no going back now. 3 days passed in Alan's garage. The space had transformed into a strange mix of scientific lab and living area. A small cot sat in one corner where they took turns sleeping. Empty pizza boxes and coffee cups covered every surface. The walls were lined with hastily drawn diagrams and charts. Their quantum amplifier was working. It wasn't pretty. A jumble of wires, circuit boards, and repurposed household electronics. But it worked. They had received 5 more messages from the horizon, each one clearer than the last. "They've moved the quantum communication equipment to their main bridge," Zote reported, reading the latest message. "Captain Jack Nelson says they're trying to boost the signal on their end too." Alan nodded, adjusting the amplifier settings. "What about their situation?" "The ship is intact, but they encountered some kind of energy field that fried their conventional communication systems. They're in orbit around Proxima Centauri now." Zoe's eyes widened as she read further. "Alan, they found something on the planet's surface. Structures. Artificial structures." "You mean?" "Yes. Evidence of alien civilization." Zoe looked up from her tablet. "The first human interstellar mission, and they've made first contact. Or at least found evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence." Alan sat back, stunned by the implications. No wonder they're desperate to communicate with Earth. A loud knock at the garage door interrupted them. Alan and Zoe froze, looking at each other in alarm. "Police. Open up, Dr. Carter." Alan sighed and stood up. "Stay here with the equipment," he told Zoe. "Keep working." He opened the door to find 2 police officers and Dr. Grant standing in his driveway. "Dr. Alan Carter," one officer said, "you're under arrest for theft of research equipment and sabotage of Institute property." "This is ridiculous," Alan protested as the officer began reading him his rights. Dr. Grant stepped forward, her face stern. "The damage to the Institute's electrical system will cost thousands to repair, not to mention the stolen equipment." "Olivia, please," Alan said quietly. "You don't understand what's happening here." "I understand perfectly. You couldn't accept that your theory was wrong, so you decided to destroy Institute property in some desperate attempt to prove yourself right." The officer moved to handcuff Alan, but he held up his hand. "Officer, before you take me in, I need to show you something. It's a matter of national security." The officer looked uncertain, glancing at Dr. Grant, who rolled her eyes. "More fantasies, Dr. Carter," she said. 5 minutes, Alan insisted. "That's all I ask." The second officer shrugged. 5 minutes won't hurt." They followed Alan into the garage. Zoe stood nervously by the quantum amplifier, which hummed quietly on the workbench. "What is this supposed to be?" Dr. Grant asked, looking around at the makeshift lab with disdain. Alan went straight to Zoe. "Any new messages?" She nodded and handed him her tablet. "Just came in." Alan read it quickly, then handed the tablet to the police officer. "This is a message from the U.S. Horizon, received less than 2 minutes ago through our quantum communication system." The officer read it aloud. "To Earth Control. We continue to explore alien structures on planet surface. Technology appears to be millions of years old. Urgent communication needed regarding first contact protocols. Please advise. Captain Jack Nelson, U.S. Horizon." The officer looked up, confused. "Is this some kind of joke? The horizon is 4 light-years away." "Not a joke," Alan said firmly. "This is what we've been trying to tell everyone. Our quantum communication system works. We're in real-time contact with the horizon right now." Dr. Grant grabbed the tablet and read the message herself. "This is impossible," she whispered, but the certainty in her voice was gone. Just then, the quantum amplifier beeped. Zoe rushed to check it. "Another incoming message," she announced. Everyone in the garage fell silent as she read the new message. "To Dr. Alan Carter. Thank you for hearing us when no one else could. The alien technology we found might revolutionize human understanding of physics, including theories about quantum communication. You were right all along. Captain Nelson." Dr. Grant's face had gone pale. The police officers looked at each other, clearly unsure what to do. "Now," Alan said quietly, "would you like to hear about our plans to help the Horizon get home?" The next morning, Alan's garage was filled with people. UESA officials in dark suits moved around the small space, setting up advanced equipment next to Alan's homemade devices. Military personnel stood guard outside. In just 24 hours, everything had changed. General Powell himself had arrived after the police contacted UESA about the situation. He had immediately recognized the importance of Alan's breakthrough and ordered all charges dropped. Now, Alan's quantum communication system was the center of the biggest scientific operation on Earth. "Dr. Carter, we're ready to begin the official communication," said a UESA technician. Alan nodded, looking at Zoe with a small smile. They had barely slept, but neither felt tired. The excitement kept them going. General Powell stepped forward. "Dr. Carter, Dr. Miller, on behalf of UESA and the world governments, I want to thank you for your extraordinary work. What you've accomplished here will change human history." "Thank you, General," Alan said. "But I'd like to remind everyone that the Horizon crew is still stranded. Their conventional engines can bring them home, but it will take years." "That's our next priority," the General assured him. "Our engineers are already studying your research to see if we can use quantum entanglement for more than just communication." A UESA official approached with a tablet. "General, the President is ready for the call." The room fell silent as the video link connected. The President's face appeared on a large screen that had been set up against the garage wall. "Dr. Carter," the President said, "I understand we have you to thank for reestablishing contact with the Horizon." Alan stood straighter. "My colleague Dr. Miller and I both worked on the project, Madam President." "Of course. Well done to both of you. I'm told we can now speak directly with Captain Nelson." "Yes, Madam President. The quantum link is stable. There's no delay in transmission, despite the 4 light-year distance." The President shook her head in amazement. "Incredible. Please connect us." Alan nodded to Zoe, who typed commands into their system. The screen split, and Captain Jack Nelson's face appeared beside the President's. He looked tired but excited, the bridge of the U.S. horizon visible behind him. "Madam President," Captain Nelson said, "on behalf of the 10,000 colonists aboard the Horizon, it's an honor to speak with you." The President smiled. "The honor is mine, Captain. We feared we had lost you all. Thanks to Dr. Carter and Dr. Miller, we can now communicate instantly across the stars." "Their breakthrough came just in time," the captain replied. "What we've discovered here on Proxima Centauri changes everything we thought we knew about the universe." The conversation continued, with Captain Nelson sharing details about the alien structures and technology they had found. Scientists from around the world were brought in to ask questions and analyze the information. In the middle of all this activity, Alan noticed Dr. Grant standing quietly in the corner of his garage. She had arrived with the UESA team but had not spoken to him. He walked over to her. "Quite a change from yesterday," he said. Dr. Grant nodded, her expression unreadable. "I was wrong about your work, Dr. Carter. I can admit that. Science is about being open to new possibilities," Alan replied, "even when they seem impossible at first. The quantum communication principles you've proven, they change everything," she said. "Every physics textbook will need to be rewritten." Before Alan could respond, General Powell called him over. "Dr. Carter, the head of the Science Council wants to discuss establishing a permanent quantum communication network." As Alan walked away, he saw Dr. Grant watching him with a new respect in her eyes. The same respect he now saw in the faces of everyone around him. The same people who had laughed at his theories just days ago. Zoe joined him grinning. "Not bad for a basement scientist with impossible ideas," she whispered. Ellen smiled. The vindication was sweet, but it wasn't about proving others wrong anymore. It was about what his discovery meant for humanity's future among the stars. 5 years later, Alan stood on the observation deck of Quantum Communication Station 1. The massive space station orbited Earth, its long antennas pointed toward the stars. Through the wide windows, he could see Earth below, beautiful and blue. Beautiful view, isn't it? Zoe asked, joining him at the window. Her uniform had 3 stars on the shoulder now, marking her position as Chief Science Officer of the station. Alan nodded. Hard to believe how much has changed. And it truly was. In just 5 years, his quantum communication technology had transformed humanity's reach into space. 50 quantum relay stations now orbited various planets and moons throughout the solar system. Each one could instantly communicate with any other, no matter the distance. The Horizon mission is launching in 30 minutes, Zoe reminded him. We should head to the control room. They walked through the gleaming corridors of the station. Staff members nodded respectfully as they passed. Everyone knew who Alan Carter was now. His face had been on the cover of every science magazine in the world. Children studied his theories in school. The control room was busy with technicians preparing for the day's big event. A large screen showed the Horizon Aya, Earth's newest and largest colony ship, sitting on its launch pad in the Nevada desert. 20,000 colonists were aboard, ready to begin their journey to Proxima Centauri. Dr. Carter, Dr. Miller, General Powell greeted them. He had aged in the past 5 years, his hair completely white now, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. Just in time. We're about to begin the final communication check. Alan took his place at the main quantum console. The system was far more advanced than his garage prototype, but the core principles remained the same. Quantum link to Proxima Centauri stable, a technician reported. Colony 1 is standing by. The screen changed to show a woman standing in what looked like a control center. Behind her, through large windows, alien structures rose against an orange sky. Greetings from Proxima Centauri, she said, smiling. This is Dr. Linda Reed, Colony 1 Governor. We're ready for the link test. Hello, Linda, Alan replied. How are things progressing with the alien technology research? Fascinating discoveries every day, she answered. The quantum physics principles you uncovered were just the beginning. We found evidence that the civilization that built these structures mastered not just quantum communication, but quantum transportation. A murmur of excitement spread through the control room. Quantum transportation, essentially teleportation, had been theoretical until now. We'll want your team to review our findings, Linda continued. With your help, we might be able to develop working prototypes within a decade. The conversation shifted to technical details about the upcoming launch. The Horizon Aya would make the journey to Proxima Centauri in just 3 years, using engines partly based on alien technology discovered by the first mission. After the call ended, Dr. Olivia Grant approached Alan. She had eventually joined the Quantum Communication Project, bringing her considerable expertise to help expand the network. The review board has approved your proposal for the Deep Space Quantum Array, she told him. Construction begins next month. Thank you, Olivia, Alan said sincerely. She hesitated, then added, I've been meaning to tell you something. I was going through old research archives and found your original quantum entanglement papers from 15 years ago. I read them again with fresh eyes. She looked at him directly. They were brilliant. I should have seen it then. We all have our blind spots, Alan replied with a small smile. The station's announcement system chimed. All personnel, T-minus 10 minutes to Horizon Aya launch. Please take your stations. Alan and Zoe returned to the observation window. Below, they could just make out the tiny dot that was the colony ship, ready to carry humanity's hopes to another star. They all laughed at us, Zoe said quietly. Now look at what we've accomplished. Alan shook his head. It was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving what's possible. As the countdown continued, Alan thought about how far they had come. From a basement lab to the stars, from ridicule to respect, and most importantly, from theory to reality. Humanity was taking its first real steps into the cosmos, united, connected, and advancing. And it all began with one idea that everyone had laughed at.